Hello, friends. My name is host Eric, host of Talking with Famous People, and this video is titled An Open Letter to DSP regarding meow meow. So, here's the thing. I've got these three tests, these three polar tests of all the ways that I type people, and all the questions I've asked, and all the things angles I've tried, and stuff I do to involve testing people. There's only three tests that I found to be completely reliable and ungameable. That is to say, if you ask these sort of questions, you'll get these sort of answers. They mean something specific, definitive, and you can rely on it. It's exclusive of other answers consistently, for example. So there's the SI polar test. If you ask people who are SI polar to give you specific examples from their past to demonstrate certain things, they'll be unable to provide you details. Like, well, they will be unable to do this. Yeah, sure, I'll give you an example. Last Thursday morning, I was at the bank, and there was this lady in front of me who was humping and hawing about something, and I was thinking, God, what is wrong with this lady? That's a story from your past that has personal examples, right? Concrete examples. SI Polar can't do that, and it doesn't matter even if you model it for them. They might be able to repeat a modeled sentence or make up something, but they won't actually have examples they can draw from their own past in which match that kind of example. It's a skills test, so you don't have to worry about their subjectivity or objectivity in the matter. They're not reporting about themselves at all, and it's also not really much open to interpretation. The questioner is going to be pretty clear and pretty cut and dry. Either they can do that not at all, or they can do that some. If you pull out of them, you have to pull on it though. You got to be like, come on, try. INFJs will pull something out. Eighth slot SI will pull something out. Fifth slot SI is going to be like, the 5/4s SI and Is. They're going to be. It's not going to be useful particularly to distinguish for them. It's going to be hard. It's going to be kind of a mishmash. But only seventh is totally unable to do that. You might get it confused for eighth sometimes if you don't pull, but only seventh, if you pull, will still be unable to provide any details. So that's one test. The second test I have is the TI polar test. If you give a bunch of deductive reasoning problems to people, you can tell pretty quickly who are TI polar. I had a student I tested yesterday. I asked her what her mom's sister was, and she said family. And I said, what's your mom's sister's child? And she was lost. I said, okay, well, note, your mom's brother is your uncle. So what's your mom's sister? She said, aunt. And I said, okay, so what's your mom's sister's child? She said, neph. She's very confused, right? This is TI polar because it's unable to follow black and white definitional chains like that. And doesn't think black and white thinking reflects reality at all. This makes sense because instead of parsing what people are saying, they're constantly putting themselves in the other person's shoes. So only TI polar will answer deductive reasoning problems in ways that indicate they don't get the point of deductive reasoning problems. If I ask the soccer question and say, Judy plays in soccer practice on Friday. Now, if she hurts herself, she won't play in the game on Saturday. But if she doesn't hurt herself, she will play on the game on Saturday. And if she plays in the game on Saturday, then one of her parents, but not both, will be there to watch her play. Her mom's out of town this weekend, and good news, she does not hurt herself at soccer practice on Friday. A TI DOM generally won't need to have that repeated at all, even. And they'll just give you the answer. TI tool maybe also. TI tool might ask to have it repeated. TI polar will answer something like, Judy likes soccer, mom works too hard, dad or mom might go there if mom gets home from work early or something. It's like they don't get the idea of deductive reasoning. So if you give a series of TI questions, deductive reasoning problems of some sort, you will be able to tell pretty quickly if somebody's TI polar. It's not just that they're getting the questions wrong, it's that they're not understanding what the point of the questions is and what you're supposed to do even. Now, people who've encountered this a lot in school may understand what the point of it is, but they'll try to get out a piece of paper and write it all down and very carefully TE it out. And that's another indication of TI polar. And the line I'm currently working at is 4. If you can't do 4-step genealogy problem, you're probably TI polar. If you can't do 3-step, you're definitely TI polar. That means my mom's sister's child. That's 3 steps. 4 steps is my mom's sister's husband's child. That's TI polar. Now, the third test is NE polar. NE polar is a little bit less definitive. I don't have like cut and dry, quite as much cut and dry, but it's pretty definitive. Basically, if you ask for 5 different reasons why the United States should invade Canada, there is no way an NE polar person will be able to come up with 5. If you ask an NE polar person, how many different ways can you tell a girl you like her without using words? Can you think of? They'll come up with, I asked Charles Benson this, he's an ISFP, and he came up with, well, I guess I need music or something, but that's SE. And, music would be fine. Put on a song that says I love you, but he wasn't even sure if that counted as an option. So it just goes to show you that any polar can't come up with possibilities at all. And that's what it means to be any polar. So you can check that pretty straightforward. Now, my message to Dave is as follows. Dave Superpowers, you are a data collector, and I respect that a great deal. I am not a data collector myself, but I understand the value of data collection and that you and I have the same ultimate goal. We want to see typology, what's true in typology, be validated so that it withstands the muster of the scientific community at large. Conventional psychology only sometimes does that, and when it does, it tends to be utterly useless. Look at the path of despair that Jordan Peterson has walked himself down. He's convinced himself that things that are absolutely relative, namely IQ tests and Big Five, are more meaningful than things that are relatively absolute. He's absolutely wrong in that regard, both relatively and absolutely. So, he's walked himself down into a path where he's stuck now. And he's stuck with a bunch of links to empirics that don't mean anything. I would love to see Dave Superpowers, you and I, with our combined efforts, you with the data gathering, and me with my whatever it is I'm doing. I don't know what I'm doing. But to provide something that psychology can't answer. What I'm looking to establish is that people who test positive for TI polar never also test positive for SI polar or NE polar. If we can simply establish that these blind spots comprise distinct pools of skills deficit that are exclusive from one another, then we ask the simple question, what is the existing explanation for this? Is psychology even aware that these skills deficits pool like this? And regardless of its awareness of it, what existing schema for understanding consciousness that psychology presents accounts for this? Does the needs-based frame account for it? Does the behaviorist frame account for it? Does a schema frame account for it? Does the developmental attachment frame account for it? No, nothing accounts for it in psychology except for cognitive functions. The mainstream psychological community poo-poos cognitive functions and says that they're inadequately validated by empirics. Of course, what psychology doesn't seem to understand is the vast majority of what it does that's of any use or value does not gain its legitimacy from empiricism, except insofar as particularist empiricism is at play. Namely, if I feel like my therapist has done a good job with me, then they have. If I feel better and happier and more whole or something, then it's a good job. And if I don't, then they've done a bad job, and that's basically all there is to it. Psychological research typically attempts to follow the same sort of angle of most social science research, which is trying to find correlations between things and then moving the P around to make it work. It's meaningless. It's insane, and it's just science theater. Real science is simply no different than that which successfully, meaningfully, and effectively explains shit. So, I want to know what the explanation for these distinct pools are. Now, granted, I can't establish for anybody else's purpose that those pools are distinct from each other in the way that I say. In other words, that we do have a certain percentage of the population test positive for SI polar, and that any individual in that population will not also test positive for TI polar or NE polar. I believe this to be the case. My anecdotal data gathering, namely me keeping track of what I see and stuff, it has been 100%. I wouldn't even be talking about it if it weren't 100%. If it hadn't proved itself time and time again as definitive, like if you test positive for SI polar, you are an ENTJ or an ENFJ. I can confirm that by testing you for ENTJ and ENFJ in all the other ways that I do. And if you are consistent in all across all boards, then yeah, in fact, once again, the SI test proved reliable. I've checked it like that many times. I'm always open to the possibility that this time's going to be the thing that fucks it up, and it doesn't work this time. This person appears to be SI polar by that test, but every other test or something else. It hasn't happened. Same with TI polar. Same with NE polar. So, but I can't. Nobody's going to take that seriously because it's just me saying that. Now, Dave, similarly, you've got a system that is built on data gathering. And the only real conflict between you and me is that you've decided the system in ahead of the data, and then put the data in to sort of match the system. But the only thing you need to make everything vastly more meaningful, legitimate, and useful to you is an external thing that's outside of your system that you can do data links against. I'm going to request that you begin asking these three tests. You do these three tests on people. The SI test, the NE test, and the TI test for polar. And simply record the data of whether somebody tests positive for one of those polars or not. Just a binary indication. Positive or negative. And then over time, you can look to see whether any of those three pools coexist, like I said, and if they don't, then you know we're onto something there. Now you can link that to your other data points, and all of a sudden your other data points become cross-referenced against something independent of your own system, as do my three tests. And it'll allow you then at that point to reformulate your understanding of the mechanics to a certain extent to match what the data is indicative of, and to determine also which of your questions are most reliable and which of them are less reliable against something other than itself. So I think this is potentially a way that that DSP can make his data gathering more purposeful towards his stated end, namely scientific validation, and can also make my stuff more useful by giving it an objective test. Dave's obviously not going to be biased in favor of proving me right, so he's a perfect person to do the data gathering. He's already doing data gathering. All it required of him is to add these three questions, and these three questions would allow him to make much more definitive claims and justify much more definitively the links he's trying to make between data and function than he can in the status quo. So it's a win-win situation, and it also hopefully is good FE in the sense that I'm being collaborative with the community in some sense in making this request of Dave. If Dave doesn't want to do it, I get it. I'm not going to do it myself, but I'm just not a data gatherer, you know. That's the legwork that I just don't like to do. It's boring, and I'm not that sciencey, I guess. But together we can bring intuition and science into a validating, empirical, intuitively resonant super bomb. The end. Pretty good FE, huh? Pretty good FE. I'm pretty proud of myself. Not this last bit right here. This is kind of bad FE, but, you know, I gotta pat myself on the back there for some good FE.